Before we begin this tale, let me provide some important context about rural Japan in the 1980s. This story takes place in what we call inaka, the deep countryside of Japan, where ancient traditions and superstitions still held powerful sway over daily life. These remote villages were incredibly isolated communities where everyone knew everyone else's business. Outsiders were viewed with deep suspicion, and old folk beliefs mixed with modern life in ways that could turn dark very quickly. The story also involves a koban or police box system. In rural areas, a single police officer would live in a small station called a chuzaisho, with his family serving as both law enforcement and community mediator. These families existed in a strange liminal space, part of the community, yet always outsiders. Now let me tell you about what happened to one such family in a forgotten corner of rural Japan. Rural Japan is a closed-off place where human relationships can turn incredibly toxic. When I was in elementary school, I transferred 3 times and attended 4 different schools. All of them were countryside schools, the kind where the entire student body was maybe 10 kids, housed in old wooden buildings or tiny branch schools. The nearest supermarket was an hour's drive away, so we relied on mobile vendors who only came to the central area around the school. Everywhere else was just rice fields and mountains, dotted with what we'd now call vanishing villages, communities on the brink of disappearing entirely. In these settlements, everyone knew everyone else's face. If a stranger appeared, whispered conversations would immediately begin. Who is that person? Outsiders were met with deep suspicion, and people rarely revealed their true thoughts to newcomers. That's just how rural places were. But it wasn't all bad. Once you were accepted into the inner circle, the sense of community was incredibly strong. People would go out of their way to help you when you were in trouble. The elderly were the best teachers for farming techniques, and I have fond memories of learning to make shiitake mushroom logs and weaving straw sandals. Our only playground was the rice fields and mountains, but since there were so few children, we all played together regardless of age. We'd go on adventures, suck nectar from azalea flowers, eat wild strawberries, and play hide and seek at the local shrine. It was actually quite fun. This was over 30 years ago, back in the Showa era. The reason I attended so many rural schools was because my father was a police officer stationed at rural police boxes. Unlike regular police stations with multiple officers, a chuzaisho serves as both workplace and residence. The officer lives there with his family and works 24 hours a day, and I mean that literally, not figuratively. Even when the officer isn't present, people still come seeking help, so the officer's wife often has to handle situations. My mother was a former policewoman herself, so she was used to such duties. Since couples like this were rare, they were highly valued, which is why we moved from one rural posting to another. Thanks to this, during my entire elementary school years, I only ever lived in police boxes. Now, crime in rural areas is extremely rare. With such small populations, the crime rate is naturally low, but there's also a tradition of resolving matters internally within the community. For example, I remember a fight that broke out during a drinking session. Fights themselves weren't unusual, but this one escalated to bloodshed, so my father was called. But what happened? Once the alcohol wore off, they said everything was fine and sent him home. When my mother asked if he shouldn't call for backup from headquarters, they told him, "We'll handle this ourselves, we don't need the officer." After that, the person who caused the bloodshed was no longer seen around the village. That's just how things were handled. So what does a rural police officer actually do? Mainly, he deals with incidents involving outsiders, crop theft, illegal trespassing on mountain property and such. On quiet days, when he wasn't making his weekly trip to headquarters, he'd catch stray rabbits for the nursery school, or check on elderly people living alone. He worked for the community. The position of the rural officer and his family was somewhat delicate and complex. For instance, even in these rural areas, some places had new housing developments carved out of hillsides. This created friction between newcomers and long-time residents. When parents and children from both sides would clash, strange rules would emerge. Don't play with the new development kids, or don't play with the village kids. In such situations, the police officer would interact and speak with both sides, but never truly belonged to either. He wasn't ignored, but there was always an invisible line that said, "You can't cross into this inner circle," especially with the old-timers. Like in the bloodshed incident I mentioned, the officer wasn't included in the community's internal matters. Police officers typically stayed only 2 to 3 years before being transferred, and unless it was a major incident, the community maintained a stance of, village business stays in the village. On the surface, relationships seemed cordial, with a mutual understanding between all parties. I've given you a long introduction, but what I'm about to tell you is a story from exactly that kind of rural place. A story from a closed-off countryside, bound by ancient customs. When I was in 6th grade, I transferred to a rural elementary school. It was surrounded by mountains, with endless rice fields stretching in every direction, truly the middle of nowhere. This particular school had about 20 students per grade, with just under 100 students total. This would be my 4th elementary school. Having become quite the expert at transferring, I finished my self-introduction at the front of the classroom, and took the empty seat at the very back. I immediately turned to the girl sitting next to me and said, "Hi, I'm Sarah, nice to meet you." It was only after speaking to her that I noticed something unusual about this girl. She had a large face, and her eyes were so narrow I couldn't tell if they were open or closed. Looking back as an adult, the closest description I can think of is that she resembled someone with Down syndrome. I hope that's not offensive. I simply can't think of another way to describe her appearance. She wore a pink sweatshirt, but it was so dirty and faded that it looked more grayish pink. Her pants were black tracksuit bottoms. Even as a child, I wondered if she might have some kind of disability. But she responded in a slow, drawn-out voice, "Nice to meet you too." When I talked with her, I found that while her movements and speech were slow, she had enough intelligence to keep up with lessons. The teacher would occasionally check if she was following along during class, but otherwise she seemed much like any other student. Her narrow eyes made her appear to be constantly smiling, and though her movements were leisurely, normal conversation was possible. Since we sat next to each other and were both girls, we talked frequently. Let's call this girl Emma. About 2 months after transferring, I was called over by the group of girls in my class. Since there was only one class per grade with 20 students total, 10 of whom were girls, this meant I was being summoned by all the girls except Emma. "Oh, is this bullying?" I thought, feeling slightly excited as I was surrounded by the group. But then Bella, the leader of the girls' group, spoke up hesitantly. "You should stay away from Emma." I wondered if this was actually about bullying Emma instead of me, but something seemed off about the girls' behavior. They looked frightened somehow. When I pressed for a reason, Bella explained that her parents had told her, "If you get involved with Emma, you'll be cursed." The other girls completely believed this. The moment I heard this, I burst out laughing. A curse? Come on, how ridiculous. But the girls were completely serious. They started sharing stories about Emma's supposed curse, though they were all things that could easily be explained as coincidences, like getting hurt on the same day they talked to Emma. I had noticed that Emma never seemed to talk to anyone except me, so this explained why. However, I couldn't accept curse as a reasonable explanation. I told the girls that such supernatural nonsense was impossible, but they wouldn't listen. While I was familiar with rural customs, the concept of a curse was new to me, and I wasn't sure how to convince them otherwise. So I temporarily promised them I'd be careful around Emma, and left it at that. Even so, we still sat next to each other, and I was the only one who talked to Emma. When we needed to pair up, Emma and I would naturally work together, and our daily routine continued unchanged for a while. Summer vacation ended and autumn arrived, but no misfortune befell me. My ordinary rural days continued peacefully. Around this time, I noticed that other girls besides me were beginning to interact with Emma, albeit in small ways, passing her worksheets and such. This surprised me, since these same girls had previously refused to even approach her. Maybe seeing that nothing bad happened to me, the person most involved with Emma, had given them confidence. Perhaps this new element, the transfer student, had opened a crack in the old rural customs. That's what I thought to myself at the time. One Sunday in autumn, I was playing with neighborhood children in the rice fields around my house, when Emma happened to walk by. Emma's house was on the other side of the mountain, and she walked an hour each day to get to school. This was the first time I'd seen her near my house on a weekend. When Emma noticed me, she invited me to come play at her house. The neighborhood kids scattered like baby spiders when they saw Emma, probably because of the whole curse thing, but I said sure, and followed her. We walked along mountain paths, picking and eating wild acacia fruit and figs along the way. By the time we reached Emma's house in a small clearing in the mountains, I was getting full from all the fruit. At first glance, I thought it was a storage shed for farm equipment. It was that small, made of corrugated metal walls and roof. So this is Emma's house, I thought as I went inside. The interior was simple, with just a small tatami room and a tiny kitchen. Emma said she always played alone there. There were no other houses nearby, so I asked what she usually did for fun. She showed me some picture books meant for younger children. I didn't see any other toys. I started getting bored and suggested we play outside. Emma gave me a tour of the mountain that day, and we had fun exploring. When evening came and I said I should head home, Emma tried to stop me, but I promised we'd play again, and headed back. The following Sunday, I ran into Emma near my house again. She invited me to her house once more, and when we got there, she had stuffed animals and dolls. We spent that day playing with the stuffed animals and dolls. When it was time to leave, Emma tried to stop me again, but I promised we'd play again, and went home. The Sunday after that, I met Emma near my house again. She invited me to her house once more, and this time she had board games. Life, Othello, all sorts of different kinds. We played those together. When it was time to leave, Emma tried to stop me again, but I promised we'd play again, and went home. The following Sunday, I met Emma again. She invited me to her house once more, but since we'd been playing together every week, I was getting a bit tired of it. Plus the hour-long walk to Emma's house was becoming tedious. So that day, we just played near my house instead. Around 3 o'clock I went home for a snack, and Emma left. The next day at school, Emma came up to me and said, "This is for you." She handed me a sticker. At that time, sticker trading was popular among the girls. We'd buy cute stickers from the general store for about 100 yen, and put them on our notebooks and pencil cases. Since elementary school students couldn't afford to buy many, we'd trade leftover stickers with friends to increase our variety. I was participating in these trades with the other girls in class. Emma hadn't been part of the sticker trading, so I figured her parents must have bought these for her. Come to think of it, each time I'd visited Emma's house, there had been new toys. However, the sticker Emma was offering was a beautiful flower-patterned one, with glitter that would cost 200-300 yen. I felt awkward just taking it for free, so when I accepted Emma's sticker, I gave her one of my special character stickers in return, saying, "Let's trade." Emma looked somewhat surprised or troubled, but I was so satisfied with what I thought was a good trade, that I didn't pay attention to her expression. It was around this time I think that Emma's belongings started gradually improving. Her notebooks became ones featuring popular anime characters, her clothes changed to frilly blouses, and she started wearing skirts. I stopped seeing the dirty faded sweatshirt. As Emma became better dressed, some girls began to resent her. Though I didn't notice at all since I had no interest in how people dressed. I think it was early winter when Bella, the leader of the girls' group, approached me. I hadn't known this when I first transferred, but Bella's father was the PTA president, and her family was like the old village headman family that oversaw all the farming families in the area. Bella herself was a very cute girl. I think everyone looked up to her. The girls in our class formed their group around Bella. Bella looked at the stickers I had spread out on my desk and said, "This sticker is so cute." It was the sticker I'd gotten from Emma. Without thinking, I told Bella, "I got it from Emma." The expression on Bella's face at that moment. I can't describe it. Did her face really contort for a moment? Or was that my imagination? Bella said, "From Emma, huh?" As she said this, she looked Emma up and down very carefully. Then she grabbed Emma's pencil case. Emma's pencil case had been a felt one she'd made in home economics class the spring before, but now it was a new one with anime characters and 7 different compartments. "Give me this!" Bella shouted this, and ran toward her group of friends. I tried to stop her, but it happened so suddenly that all I could manage was, "Hey! What?" I looked at Emma and yelled, "We have to tell the teacher." Emma just stared blankly at Bella. When I grabbed Emma's shoulders to shake her into action, she muttered quietly, "It's okay." "What?" I said in disbelief. Emma narrowed her already narrow eyes even further and said, "Because I'll get something else in exchange." The last part was too quiet for me to hear clearly. I was about to say what again when the bell rang, and the teacher entered the classroom. I returned to my seat, fully intending to report this incident to the teacher after class. But during the lesson, Bella suddenly collapsed. I heard a wheezing sound, and the next moment, Bella was thrown to the floor along with her desk, convulsing. The classroom erupted in chaos. The teacher frantically called an ambulance while students gathered around Bella. Everything felt like it was moving in slow motion. I remained standing at my desk, unable to move. When I glanced at Emma, she was sitting calmly, just watching as Bella was carried away. Bella was taken away in the ambulance, with our homeroom teacher accompanying her. The rest of our classes that day were taught by the substitute teacher. After school, I was called by our homeroom teacher. I don't know when he'd returned from the hospital. He said he needed to talk to me about Bella and led me to the principal's office. It was my first time entering the principal's office, and I was nervous. The principal's desk was at the far end of the room, with a sitting area near the front. Sitting there were Bella's parents, the vice principal, and the principal. Our homeroom teacher stood near the entrance. Seeing all these important adults lined up, even as a child I knew this was serious. Bella's mother was the first to speak. "Why is this child unharmed?" Bella said Sarah would be okay. She suddenly shouted this, and seemed ready to lunge at me. Bella's father held her shoulder and urged her to sit back down. I was too shocked to understand the situation and stood frozen. Then the principal spoke to me gently. "Sarah, did you receive anything from Emma?" Though the principal's voice was kind, it was strained. He seemed very nervous. I managed to answer in a hoarse voice. "I got a sticker." The moment I said this, I heard all the adults gasp. "Why, this child, from Emma. Why is she okay?" They were all muttering things like this. Finally my brain started trying to make sense of the situation, and I remembered the story about Emma's curse. The adults probably thought Bella's condition was caused by Emma's curse. This explained everything, but it also made me angry. How could so many grown adults be saying such things? So I shouted, "I just traded stickers with Emma. I didn't steal a pencil case like Bella did." The moment I said this, all the adults stared at me. "Traded? That's why," Bella's mother muttered. Then Bella's father yelled, "Why didn't you tell Bella that?" He tried to grab me. The principal and vice principal restrained him while Bella's mother cried and screamed. It was all too much. Just then, my father entered the principal's office. In his police uniform. The homeroom teacher who had disappeared must have called him.
All the adults immediately fell silent. This child, she's the police officer's daughter. One of them muttered. And Bella's father clicked his tongue in frustration. I left the principal's office with my father. I went home in a daze. When we got home, my mother was upset, but didn't know what had happened, so there was nothing she could do. My father took me home, and then returned to the school to talk with Bella's father. But Bella's father was just angry without clearly explaining why, leaving my father confused as well. That night, my parents decided we would move. They said, "We don't know exactly what happened, but we can't predict what Bella's father, a powerful figure in this community, might do to you in his anger." Since I was starting middle school the next year anyway, they felt it would be better for me to settle somewhere permanent rather than keep transferring. That very day, they decided we'd build a house on empty land near my father's family home, which was on the opposite end of the prefecture. It was suddenly decided that my mother and I would immediately move in with my paternal grandparents. My father would temporarily rent an apartment away from the village and commute to the police box. When I asked what would happen if he had to stay there another year, if he didn't get transferred, my father said, "When something like this happens, personnel transfers happen quickly." Indeed, there was an unusual year-end personnel change, and my father was transferred. From the day Bella collapsed, I didn't attend the village elementary school anymore. I was preparing to move. While I wasn't satisfied with this outcome, I understood it was the only option. However, there was something I absolutely had to confirm before leaving. So I snuck out of the house and headed to Emma's home. It was a weekday afternoon, and I figured most adults would be at work, so Bella's father wouldn't spot me. As I climbed the mountain path I'd walked with Emma before, an elderly man working in the terraced fields called out to me, "Hey, what are you doing here?" Since the old man seemed kind, I answered honestly, "I'm going to visit a friend who lives up in the mountains." When he heard this, the old man stopped his farm work and approached me. "There's nobody living in these mountains. Where exactly are you going, child?" I thought that was impossible and said, "That can't be right. There's a girl named Emma. Her house looks like a small hut, but I've been there many times." The moment I said this, the old man's expression changed completely. You're the police officer's daughter, aren't you? I thought it was strange seeing a child out during school hours. It sounds like your father and Bella's father have worked things out. But if Bella's father sees you, there's no telling what he might do. It took all of us to convince Bella's father not to harm a small child. We owe your father a debt of gratitude. The matter is settled with you leaving this village. Go home immediately." I was shocked to hear such ominous words from the old man, but I realized he understood my situation better than I did. If I was going to ask anyone, it had to be him. "Is Emma okay?" "Emma? Bella can't touch that one." "Absolutely not." The old man seemed completely certain of this. I felt a little relieved. "What about Bella?" The old man looked toward Bella's house and said, "She's alive." "She's alive? What does that mean?" When I asked again, the old man made a face like he'd bitten into something bitter. "You mustn't get involved anymore. You were just lucky this time, and you must never forget that." He turned me around and pushed my back to make me return the way I'd come. I hurriedly asked, "Bella said her father told her that anyone who gets involved with Emma will be cursed. Is that what this is about?" The old man muttered, "Cursed?" and then asked, "Who said such a thing?" Bella said she heard it from her father. When I answered, the old man sighed and said, "So that's what the young folks are calling it these days." "No, it wasn't originally anything like that. It was..." The old man stopped mid-sentence. He seemed to be thinking about something, but he wouldn't tell me what. Eventually he said, "Just go home quickly. The truth is, even being seen talking to you puts me in danger." I could tell the old man was genuinely worried about me, and I didn't want to cause him trouble, so I decided to go home. As I was walking down the mountain path, Emma appeared from a side trail. "Emma!" I ran to her. "Emma, I'm so glad you're safe. Are you okay?" "I'm moving away. I don't understand what's happening at all, but..." I spoke rapidly to Emma. But then I noticed something was wrong with her. She kept staring at her feet and wouldn't look at me. Emma, what's wrong? As I reached out to touch her shoulder, she muttered, "Gone." What? When I asked her to repeat it, I suddenly looked up and brought her face close to mine. Sarah can't be taken anymore. Because Sarah is... The last part was too quiet for me to hear. Emma's eyes, which were usually so narrow I couldn't tell if they were open, were slightly open now. They looked like they were painted completely black, though that might have been a trick of the setting sun's light. Emma smiled in a way that made her seem like something entirely different from the Emma I knew. As I stood there in shock, Emma walked past me and ran up the mountain path. That was the last time I saw Emma. The next day my mother and I moved in with my grandparents. I haven't been near that village since. Even within our family, that incident became taboo. Whenever we share happy family memories, they're always from somewhere other than that village. My grandparents' house was in a fairly large town, and I was busy adjusting to non-rural life. Eventually memories of that village faded. I was reminded of it only recently when I found the sticker Emma had given me in an old school notebook from a closet. Thinking back, there were many strange things. Emma, always alone in that small mountain house. The toys that kept appearing. Come to think of it, I never saw or heard about Emma's parents. Emma gradually becoming better dressed. Why we weren't supposed to receive things from Emma. What the adults' behavior meant. What happened to Bella? Whenever I can't find answers to these questions, I remember what my father said when we were moving. There are many things in this world that simply can't be helped. That concludes our story.